Welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air feels heavy, the room feels colder, and somewhere in the dark, you get the strange feeling that you are being watched. Tonight, you will hear stories from people who became witnesses to things they never expected to see. Some saw someone standing in the shadows. Some heard voices with no one nearby. Others found themselves in places that did not feel real at all. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And if you enjoy true scary stories with a slow, dark atmosphere, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. Get comfortable. The night has already begun. During the summer of 2020, when the whole world felt like it had been paused because of COVID, I was only 7 years old. At that age, time already feels slow, but during lockdown, every single day felt like it lasted forever. There was no school in the normal way. There were no fun places to go, no playgrounds packed with kids, no birthday parties, no random trips to the store just because we were bored. Everything felt quiet, closed, and strange. Even the streets in our neighborhood felt different. They were not empty all the time, but they had that weird silence that made everything feel unnatural. I lived in the northern part of Austin, Texas, in a neighborhood that seemed normal from the outside. It had houses, driveways, trees, sidewalks, fences, and families who mostly kept to themselves. It was the kind of place where nothing really scary was supposed to happen. At least, that is what I believed back then. Because I had too much free time, I started riding my bike almost every day. At first, I only stayed close to my house. I would ride in circles around the same streets, race past parked cars, and pretend I was going on some big adventure. But after a while, the same roads became boring. I wanted to see something new. I wanted to find a place that felt different from the rest of the neighborhood. When you are 7 years old, the world feels much bigger than it really is. A small ditch can look like a canyon. A narrow path between two fences can feel like a secret passage. An empty field can feel like land that no one has ever discovered before. And anything adults tell you not to go near suddenly becomes the most interesting thing in the world. One day, I was riding my bike with my dad when I noticed something I had never seen before. Near the edge of the neighborhood, there was a fence that surrounded the area, but part of it had an opening. It did not look like a proper gate. It looked more like the fence had been damaged, or maybe people had pushed through it so many times that the gap had slowly become bigger. Beyond that opening was an area that did not look like it belonged with the rest of the neighborhood. There was a rough trail near some sewer water, and the smell hit me right away. It was thick, rotten, and disgusting, the kind of smell that made you want to cover your nose and breathe through your mouth. The whole place looked forgotten, like nobody cared what happened back there. There were weeds everywhere, old branches on the ground, and mud in places where the dirt had been wet for too long. At first, it did not seem like anything special. It just looked dirty and abandoned. But then I noticed another path. This second path was different. It was not wide or clear like a normal trail. It was barely visible. Bushes covered parts of it. Fallen branches blocked the way. Overgrown plants leaned over it like they were trying to hide it. It looked like nobody had used that path in a very long time. Maybe years. That should have made me want to stay away from it. Instead, it made me curious. I kept staring at it, wondering where it went. The path disappeared into the trees, and from where I was standing, I could not see what was beyond them. It felt like the trail was inviting me to find out. That is the kind of stupid thought only a child can have. A grown person might see a dark, overgrown trail and think it looks dangerous. A 7-year-old sees it and thinks it looks like an adventure. My dad noticed me looking at it and immediately told me not to go there. He did not yell. He did not explain much. He just said it in a serious voice, the kind of voice that made it clear he was not joking. He told me that path was not a good idea and that I should stay away from it. At that age, I did not understand why. To me, it was just a trail. A hidden one, yes, but still just a trail. I did not see any danger. I did not see anything scary. I only saw a mystery. But that was the problem. The mystery stayed in my mind. For weeks, I kept thinking about that path. Even when I was at home, even when I was eating, even when I was trying to sleep, I would remember the way it disappeared between the trees. I wondered where it led. I wondered if there was another neighborhood on the other side. I wondered if there was an old building back there, or maybe a creek, or some secret place older kids knew about. And the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to go back. Eventually, I got the chance. One evening, I was with my best friend. We were both bored, and like usual, we decided to ride our bikes around the neighborhood. I told my parents we were just going biking nearby. Technically, that was true. We were biking. We were still close enough to the neighborhood at first, but I knew exactly where I wanted to go. I told my friend about the hidden path. I probably made it sound exciting, like we were about to discover something amazing. I told him there was an opening in the fence and a trail nobody seemed to use. He wanted to see it right away. So we rode toward the edge of the neighborhood. It was later in the day, close to evening. The sun was still up, but it was lower in the sky. The light had that orange color that makes everything look soft for a little while before darkness starts creeping in. Back then, I did not think much about the time. I was not thinking about getting home late. I was not thinking about the sun going down. I was not thinking about what could be hiding in a place adults told me to avoid. I only wanted to know where the path went. We found the opening in the fence again. Seeing it a second time made my stomach feel strange. It looked exactly how I remembered it, but now that I was there without my dad, it felt different. The gap looked darker. The area beyond it looked quieter. Even the air seemed heavier. My friend went through first, pushing his bike over the rough ground. I followed him. The smell from the sewer water was still there, sour and rotten, hanging in the air like the place had been left to decay. We passed the first trail and found the hidden one again. The plants around it moved slightly in the wind, brushing against each other with a dry, whispering sound. It almost sounded like someone talking under their breath. At first, riding down the path felt exciting. The trail was narrow, but we could still follow it. Our tires bumped over roots and sticks. Leaves scraped against our legs. Tree branches hung low enough that we had to duck under them. Every few seconds, one of us would laugh or say something stupid because we were trying to make the place feel less creepy than it was. But the farther we went, the less we talked. The neighborhood slowly disappeared behind us. The sound of cars faded. The distant voices of people outside their homes disappeared. Even the normal city sounds became quiet. Soon, all I could hear was the crunch of our bike tires, the buzzing of insects, and the wind moving through the trees. The path seemed to keep going deeper than it should have. I remember looking back once and realizing I could not see the fence anymore. I could not see the houses. I could not see anything familiar. It was just trees behind us and trees ahead of us. That was when the excitement started to fade. The trail changed the deeper we went. It became harder to follow. Moss and weeds covered the dirt. Bushes grew into the path, forcing us to slow down. Fallen branches were scattered across the ground, some dry and easy to ride over, others thick enough that we had to stop and lift our bikes around them. The sunlight was fading too. It did not happen all at once. It happened slowly, the way evening does when you are not paying attention. 1 minute the forest looked golden. The next minute, Shadows started stretching between the trees. Then, the spaces between the branches turned darker, and the trail ahead began to look less like a path and more like a tunnel. I remember feeling uncomfortable. It started as a small feeling in my chest, like nervousness. Then it spread into my stomach. I looked around and suddenly realized how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, not normal quiet. It was the kind of quiet that feels like everything around you is holding its breath. I told my friend we should turn around. I tried to say it casually, like I was only worried about getting home late. I told him my parents would be mad if I stayed out too long. But that was not the real reason. The truth was, I felt like we had gone too far. Something about the place felt wrong. My friend did not want to go back. He said we should keep going just a little farther. He thought we might find something cool. He was smiling, acting brave, and because I was 7, I did not want him to think I was scared. That is one of the dumbest things kids do. They feel danger, but ignore it because they do not want to look weak. So I kept going. A few minutes later, I heard something. At first, it was so faint that I thought I imagined it. It came from somewhere far ahead, beyond the trees. It did not sound like an animal exactly. It did not sound like wind either. It sounded like a voice, but not clear enough to understand. I stopped pedaling for a second. My friend stopped too. We listened. For a moment, there was nothing, just leaves moving and insects buzzing. Then it came again. This time, it sounded more like crying. Not loud crying, not right beside us. It was far away, thin and broken, like someone trying to cry but running out of breath. Then another sound followed it, a shout. Then something that sounded like a hard bang, maybe metal hitting wood, maybe glass breaking, maybe something else. My whole body went cold. I looked at my friend, expecting him to look scared too, but he looked excited. His eyes got wide, like we had finally found the adventure we came for. I did not feel that way at all. Everything inside me was telling me to leave. It was around 6:30 in the evening by then. I knew we were already pushing it. I knew my parents would be looking for me soon. But that was not what scared me most. What scared me was that those sounds did not belong in the woods. They did not sound like kids playing. They did not sound like someone walking a dog. They sounded like something private. Something we were not supposed to hear. My friend whispered that we should check it out. I told him no. But he kept moving, and I followed, because I was scared of being left alone on that trail more than I was scared of what was ahead. The farther we went, the louder the sounds became. The crying came and went. The shouting was harder to understand, but it had anger in it. Every now and then we heard another strange noise. A scrape, a crash, something dragging or moving across the ground. Then, the trail ended. It did not slowly fade away. It just stopped. Ahead of us was a wall of trees, bushes, and tangled branches. There was no clear way forward, no dirt path, no gap, nothing. For a second, I felt relieved. I thought that meant we had to turn back. We could tell ourselves the trail was over and go home. But then we heard another scream. It came from beyond the trees. It was louder than before. My friend got off his bike. I remember whispering for him to stop, but my voice sounded weak. He left his bike near a bush and started pushing through the branches. Leaves shook around him. Twigs snapped under his feet. He disappeared halfway into the greenery. I stood there with my bike, frozen. I did not want to follow him. I did not want to be there at all. But after a few seconds, the fear of being alone made me move. I got off my bike and pushed it forward, forcing myself through the branches after him. The bushes scratched my arms. A branch caught my shirt. The ground was uneven, and I nearly tripped. Then suddenly, the trees opened up, and we saw it. A barn. It was large, old, and sitting by itself in a clearing, hidden so deep behind the trees that no one from the neighborhood would ever notice it. It looked abandoned, but not in a peaceful way. It looked like something had been left there on purpose. The wood was dark and weathered. Some boards were cracked. The roof looked worn down, and the shadows around it were deep enough that I could not see all the details. There were no houses nearby, no cars, no lights, no people standing outside, just that barn. The sight of it made my skin crawl. I remember thinking, even as a kid, that it should not have been there. It felt wrong to find something that big hidden in a place no one talked about. It was not like discovering an old shed or a broken fence. It felt like stepping into a part of the world that had been waiting quietly for us. Then I noticed the gate. There was blood on it, a lot of it. Not just a tiny mark, not just a rusty stain that could be explained away. It was dark, smeared across part of the gate, and even from where I stood, I knew what it looked like. My mind did not want to accept it at first. I tried to tell myself it was paint, maybe mud, maybe something else. But deep down, I knew. There were broken glass bottles scattered on the ground near the gate. Some were crushed into tiny pieces. Others were still partly whole, catching the last bit of fading light. The whole area looked disturbed, like people had been there, but not for anything good. The sounds were coming from around the barn. The crying, the shouting, the strange noises. The sky was turning darker. The last light was slipping behind the trees, and shadows were spreading across the clearing. The barn seemed to grow bigger as the light faded, its dark shape standing there like it was watching us. I wanted to leave. I wanted to grab my friend and ride home as fast as possible. But my friend stepped forward. He left his bike behind and started walking toward the gate. I wanted to tell him to stop. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to run up and pull him back. But I could not move. My body felt stuck, like the fear had locked me in place. My hands were gripping my bike so tightly that my fingers hurt. I pulled my bike behind some bushes and crouched there, hiding as best as I could. I watched him through the branches. He walked slowly toward the gate. The broken glass cracked under his shoes. He stopped in front of it for a moment. I could see his shoulders moving as he breathed. Then he reached out and touched the gate. It made a small creaking sound, the kind of sound that feels too loud when everything else is quiet. He opened it just enough to look inside. I could not see what was inside the barn. From where I was hiding, the angle was wrong. All I could see was my friend standing there, staring into the darkness. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then he screamed. I have never forgotten that scream. It was not the kind of scream kids make when they jump out at each other for fun. It was not a surprised scream. It was not even like he had seen something gross. It was pure terror. It was the sound of someone seeing something their mind could not understand. The scream was so sharp and loud that it felt like it cut through the trees. My ears rang. My heart slammed against my chest. In that moment, every bit of curiosity I had left vanished. I did not wait. I did not call his name. I did not ask what he saw. I grabbed my bike and ran. Then I got on and started riding as fast as I could. Branches hit my arms and face as I forced my way back through the trees. My tires slipped over roots and dirt. I almost crashed more than once, but I did not slow down. Behind me, I thought I heard movement. Maybe it was my friend. Maybe it was something else. I was too terrified to look back. The forest looked completely different now. The trail that had seemed exciting earlier looked strange and unfamiliar in the fading light. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow looked like a person standing still. Every sound behind me made me pedal faster. I remember breathing so hard that my chest hurt. I remember my legs burning. I remember thinking I was lost and that I would never find my way back home. Somehow, after what felt like forever, I found another trail. It connected back toward the neighborhood, or at least I hoped it did. I followed it without thinking. A few minutes later, I saw the sidewalk. I came out of the trees so fast that I almost fell. The neighborhood lights were beginning to turn on. Houses were there again. Cars were parked in driveways. Everything looked normal, but I did not feel normal. I felt like I had brought something back with me from the woods, some invisible fear that clung to my clothes and skin. I stopped near the sidewalk, shaking and trying to breathe. For a few minutes, I was alone. Then my friend came out from the trail behind me. But he was not the same. His face was pale. His eyes looked empty and wide, like he was still seeing whatever had been inside that barn. He did not say anything. He did not yell at me for leaving him. He did not explain what happened. He just got on his bike and started riding. I asked him what he saw. He did not answer. I asked again. Still nothing. We rode home in silence. For two 7-year-old kids, it was too much. We had gone into the woods looking for a secret place, something exciting, something we could talk about later like a fun adventure. Instead, we found a hidden barn, blood on a gate, strange screams, and something inside that scared my friend so badly he could not even speak. When I got home, I told my mom everything. I told her about the fence opening. I told her about the hidden trail. I told her about the sewer water, the disappearing path, the crying, the shouting, the barn, the blood, the broken glass, and my friend's scream. I was probably crying while I told her. I remember her face changing as she listened. At first, she looked confused. Then, she looked worried. Then, she looked scared in a way parents try to hide from their children, but never fully can. Later, I found out my friend was affected much worse than I understood at the time. He could not sleep properly for a week. He had nightmares. He became afraid of being alone. His parents eventually had to get him therapy because whatever he saw inside that barn stayed with him. It was not just a normal scare. It was not something he forgot after a few days. But the strangest part was this. He never told anyone what he saw. Not his parents, not the therapist, not me. Nobody, no matter how many times people asked. He stayed quiet. Sometimes he would say he did not want to talk about it. Sometimes he would just look away. Other times, he acted like he had not heard the question. Even years later, he has never explained what was inside that barn. That might be the part that bothers me most. Because I was there. I saw the barn. I saw the blood on the gate. I heard the sounds. I heard his scream, but I never saw what he saw. And maybe that is worse. As I got older, I tried to find the place again. At first, I thought it would be easy. I knew the neighborhood. I knew where the fence opening had been. I knew the general direction of the trail. So one day, I went back with other friends, this time older and more prepared. I wanted answers. I wanted to prove to myself that it had been real. I wanted to find that barn again and understand what had happened there. But every time we searched, something went wrong. The path never looked the same. Sometimes the trails seemed to end too early. Sometimes we found different paths that led nowhere. Sometimes the area looked familiar for a few minutes, then suddenly not familiar at all. We would walk or ride around, trying to match what I remembered, but we could never find the same clearing. We never found the barn. It was like the woods had swallowed it, or like we had only been allowed to find it once. I know how that sounds. I know people will say we were children, that we got confused, that the blood might not have been blood, that the screams might have been animals or people messing around, Maybe there is a logical explanation. Maybe that barn was torn down. Maybe the trail changed over time. Maybe my memory has made it worse than it was. But I know what I remember. I remember the smell of the sewer water near the fence. I remember the hidden trail covered in bushes. I remember how quiet the woods became the deeper we went. I remember the crying and shouting coming from somewhere ahead. I remember the old barn standing alone in that clearing like it had been waiting there for years. I remember the dark stains on the gate. I remember the broken glass under my friend's shoes. And most of all, I remember his scream. Even now, sometimes I ride near those trails in the evening. I do not know why I still do it. Maybe a part of me still wants answers. Maybe I want to hear something that proves I did not imagine it. Maybe I want to finally find the place again. But sometimes, when the sun gets low and the trees begin to darken, I hear sounds from far away. Not every time, only sometimes. A faint cry, a shout carried through the trees, a strange noise that stops the moment I stop moving. Whenever it happens, my body reacts before my mind does. My chest tightens. My hands go cold. I feel 7 years old again, standing behind those bushes, staring at that barn while my friend walks toward the gate. I still do not know what was inside. Maybe I never will. But I know this much. We were not supposed to be there. And whatever my friend saw inside that barn, it was bad enough to follow him home, keep him awake for nights, and stay locked inside his mind for years. A hidden trail, a forgotten barn, blood on the gate, a scream that changed my friend forever, and a place I have never been able to find again. I still remember one of the most terrifying nights of my life, and even now, when I think about it, my body reacts before my mind does. It was not a ghost story. It was not something supernatural. There was no shadow figure in a hallway, no strange voice calling from an empty room, no monster standing in the dark. But sometimes real life is worse than any ghost story, because the thing you are afraid of is not imaginary. It is real, armed, official, and standing right in front of you. This happened in Saudi Arabia, and looking back now, I honestly cannot believe how badly things could have gone. At the time, I was making some terrible decisions. I was under the influence of drugs, which is something I absolutely do not recommend. And I was driving around late at night without thinking clearly. That alone was stupid. I know that now. I probably knew it then too, but when you are in that kind of state, you do not think about consequences the way you should. You think the night is empty. You think nothing will happen. You think you have done this before, so you can do it again. That is how people get careless. That is how people walk straight into disaster. The area we were near was close to a newly built airport. At around 2 in the morning, it was usually completely empty. That was part of why we got comfortable there. There was almost never anyone around. The roads felt abandoned. The lights were on, but the place had that strange, unfinished feeling some new areas have at night. Like the whole world had been built, but not fully opened yet. There were long stretches of road, wide empty spaces, and that cold artificial glow from streetlights that makes everything look a little unreal. At that hour, the silence was heavy. Not peaceful, exactly. More like the kind of silence that makes you feel hidden from the rest of the world. And we liked that. We thought it meant we were safe. We would drive through the area, smoke, and act like nothing could touch us there. It became one of those places you convince yourself you understand. A quiet road, a dead zone, a harmless late-night spot. We had been there enough times that the emptiness started to feel familiar, and familiarity is dangerous when you are already making bad choices. That night started the same way. I was not in the right state of mind. My judgment was terrible. My thoughts were loose, slow, and careless. I was moving through the night with that fake confidence people get when they are doing something wrong but have not been caught yet. The road was quiet. The airport area looked empty. Nothing seemed unusual. Then I saw it. A checkpoint. A police checkpoint. The second I noticed it, everything inside me went cold. It was like the drugs disappeared from my body in one violent second, or at least the illusion of safety did. One moment, I was driving casually through an empty area, thinking the night belonged to me. The next, I was staring ahead at police officers and realizing I had driven straight into a situation I was not ready for. There is a special kind of fear that hits when you know you cannot turn around. It is not like seeing danger from far away and choosing another route. It is not like hearing a noise and deciding to stay inside. This was different. The road was already carrying me toward them. My car was already in the open. They could already see me. If I tried to turn away suddenly, that would make everything worse. There was no clean exit, no easy escape, no chance to pretend I had not seen them. I had to keep driving forward. My hands were on the steering wheel, but they did not feel fully steady anymore. My heartbeat started pounding so hard that it felt like it was moving up into my throat. Suddenly, every bad decision from that night lined up in my head all at once. The drugs, the driving, the time, the location, the fact that I was not clear-headed, the fact that I was about to talk to police. In a place like that, one wrong answer could change everything. As I approached, one of the officers stepped forward. He was clearly in charge, or at least he looked like the highest-ranking officer there. There was something about his posture and the way the others seemed to move around him that made that obvious. He looked directly at me, and even before he spoke, I could feel the whole situation tightening around me. He asked where I was going. That should have been a simple question. A normal person should be able to answer it without thinking. But I was not normal in that moment. My mind was racing too fast and too badly. I knew I needed to sound calm. I knew I needed to give an answer that made sense. I knew I needed to appear like just another driver who had accidentally ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But fear and intoxication are a horrible combination. You think too slowly and too fast at the same time. Your mouth opens before your brain finishes building the sentence. You try to sound casual, but every word feels suspicious. You become aware of your own face, your voice, your eyes, the way you are sitting, the way your hands are moving. You become too aware of everything, and that makes you worse at acting normal. Then, I made the worst possible mistake. I answered him. I told him I was going to King X Airport to pick up my friend. The problem was that there was no King X Airport. It was not a real place. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew something was wrong. It was like I heard myself from outside my own body. The answer sounded fake because it was fake, but not in a clever way. It sounded like the kind of nonsense a person says when their brain is not working and fear is steering for them. The officer noticed immediately. He looked confused. X? That one word felt like a trapdoor opening under me. Then he told me to pull over to the right. That was the exact moment reality hit me with full force. Until then, some tiny part of me had still hoped I could pass through. Maybe they would ask one quick question, wave me along, and the night would continue. But when he told me to pull over, that hope died. Now I was no longer just passing through a checkpoint. I was being stopped. I was being looked at. I was being separated from the flow of traffic and placed under attention. The fear became real. I pulled over, and my heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. Every possible outcome ran through my head. A search, more questions, my condition becoming obvious. Arrest, detention, a legal nightmare. Something much worse than I could handle in that state. I knew I had given them a reason to be suspicious. I had handed it to them myself. That is one of the worst feelings in the world. Knowing you are in trouble because of your own mouth, because of one stupid answer, because you were careless for 1 second in front of the wrong person. An officer was sent to search my Jeep. Somehow, by luck, the officer they sent did not seem like the sharpest one there. That is not an insult as much as it is the honest truth of how it felt in the moment. He looked through the vehicle, and my Jeep was completely clean. There was nothing obvious inside, nothing sitting out, nothing they could immediately use against me. But I knew that clean did not mean safe. The situation itself was still dangerous. My answer had been ridiculous. My state was not normal. The officer in charge had already noticed something was off. I needed to distract them somehow. I needed to create confusion, or at least make the situation feel like a misunderstanding instead of something more serious. So I switched to English. I started saying it was a mistake. I told them I had taken the wrong turn. I said I was confused. I tried to sound like someone who had simply ended up in the wrong place and did not know how to explain it properly. The officer looked at me. For some reason, the sudden change seemed to throw him off. Normally, a language barrier could make a bad situation worse. It could make officers frustrated. It could create more questions. But in that moment, strangely, it worked in my favor. It changed the rhythm of the interaction. It made the situation feel messy and annoying instead of clean and suspicious. The officer seemed frustrated and responded in Arabic, basically telling me to speak Arabic instead. The whole thing felt surreal. I was standing there, trying to act normal, while every part of me understood that one wrong question could ruin me. One wrong look, one wrong answer, one small discovery. I was surrounded by officers at a checkpoint in the middle of the night, and I knew I had no control over what would happen next. That is the part people do not always understand about fear. It is not only fear of punishment, it is fear of powerlessness. When you are standing in front of police officers in a situation like that, your future suddenly belongs to someone else. Their mood matters, their patience matters, their suspicion matters, their decision matters. You can try to speak carefully, but you do not control the room. You do not control the road. You do not control the next step. Another thing that probably helped me was that I did not have my residence card with me. That sounds strange, because usually not having proper documents can make things worse. But in that specific moment, it may have helped me. That card would have revealed my nationality and residency situation. Instead, I gave them my driver's license, which did not show that information the same way. I was relying on luck, confusion, and timing more than anything else. Every second felt too long. The officer searched the Jeep. I watched. I waited. The night around us felt huge and empty, but the checkpoint felt tight and suffocating. The lights were too bright. The officers were too close. The silence between questions felt too sharp. I kept thinking that if they looked harder, if they asked the right thing, if one officer suddenly decided he did not like the situation, everything could change. But somehow, after searching the Jeep and finding nothing, they let me go. I drove away, but I was not the same person who had driven toward that checkpoint. The fear had sobered me in a way nothing else could have. It had cut through everything. 1 minute, I had been driving through an empty area, careless and under the influence, thinking nothing could happen. The next minute, I was sitting in front of police officers, trying to explain why I had said I was going to an airport that did not exist. That night became the second scariest day of my life. The first had happened years earlier, and strangely enough, that one also involved Saudi police. Back then, I was living there illegally with a friend. That situation alone carried its own kind of constant fear. People who have never dealt with legal status issues may not understand how heavy it can be. When your paperwork is not right, every normal thing becomes dangerous. A drive, a checkpoint, a random officer, a question, a document you do not have. Your whole life can suddenly become something someone else has the power to interrupt. We were in a car that day, and my friend was in the back making joints while I was sitting in the passenger seat. Then we ran into another surprise checkpoint. This time, the fear was different, but just as intense. The police were not focused on what we were doing in the car. They were focused on residency. They wanted to know who was legally allowed to be there and who was not. That made the whole situation terrifying in a completely different way. Because even if they missed everything else, my status alone could create serious trouble. I was young then, and I looked even younger. I had a baby face, and one of the officers actually hesitated when he looked at me. I remember that hesitation, because for one tiny moment, it felt like maybe he was not sure what to do with me. Maybe I looked too young to be treated harshly. Maybe I looked scared. Maybe some small human part of him paused. But it did not save me. It seemed like he was trying to meet some requirement quickly and finish his work. Maybe they needed numbers. Maybe they were processing people fast. Maybe I was just one more person in the line of their day. Whatever the reason, before I fully understood what was happening, I was taken away. That was one of the most terrifying moments I had ever experienced. There are moments in life where your mind cannot catch up to the speed of what is happening. 1 second, you are in a car with your friend. The next, you are being separated from everything familiar. You do not know where you are going. You do not know who is responsible for you now. You do not know when you will get out. You do not know whether anyone can help. I was taken into pre-deportation detention. Just the idea of that place was enough to make my stomach twist. It was not only about the building or the room. It was about what the place represented. It meant I was no longer moving freely. It meant my situation had become official. It meant I was inside a process that could lead to consequences I could not easily undo. Then I realized it was early Friday morning. That made everything feel worse. The weekend was starting, and in my mind, that meant delays. Offices closed. People unavailable. No one answering calls. No paperwork moving. No clear timeline. I imagined myself stuck there for days. I imagined my family not knowing what was happening. I imagined being pushed deeper into a system I did not understand and could not control. The fear was overwhelming. It was not a loud fear. It was not screaming or running. It was the kind of fear that sits heavily in your chest when you realize your life may have just changed and you were not ready. You start thinking about all the possible consequences: deportation, being separated from people you know, legal trouble, shame, the humiliation of explaining what happened, the fear of not being able to stop it. I felt trapped, completely trapped. Then somehow, luck came through again. A connection through my family helped. Someone knew someone who knew the right person. That is how things sometimes work in places where official systems and personal connections sit side by side. One person makes a call. Another person speaks to someone. A door opens that would not have opened otherwise. Because of that, I was released after what felt like the longest 2 hours of my life. 2 hours can sound short from the outside. It did not feel short. It felt endless. When you do not know what will happen next, time changes. Every minute becomes heavier. Every sound feels important. Every person walking past could be the one who decides something about your future. In those 2 hours, my mind lived through every terrible outcome it could imagine. When I got out, my friends were relieved. I Ironically, they were also annoyed because they had rushed to get me my share of the joint. Looking back, that part feels almost unreal. The whole situation had been terrifying, and yet there was this absurd detail at the end, like life was trying to remind me how careless and ridiculous we were back then. I had just been in pre-deportation detention, scared out of my mind, and my friends were still thinking about the joint. That is how strange memory can be. The horror and the stupidity sit right next to each other. As I look back now, both of those police encounters feel like warnings that I barely survived. Not because I was smart, not because I handled everything perfectly. I survived them mostly because of luck, timing, and other people's decisions. That is a terrifying thing to admit, because it means I was not really in control. Being born and raised somewhere does not always mean you automatically belong there. That is a truth many people do not understand unless they have lived near the edges of legal status. In some places, your life depends entirely on paperwork. If your parents do not have the right residency documents, your situation can become complicated before you are even old enough to understand why. You can spend your whole childhood in a country, learn its roads, its language, its routines, and still be treated like you do not fully belong there. That kind of uncertainty changes the way you move through the world. A checkpoint is not just a checkpoint. A police officer is not just a police officer. A missing document is not just an inconvenience. It can become the thing that separates you from your life. For me, those moments with the police were terrifying because they showed me how quickly everything can change. A normal night can turn into a life-changing event in seconds. A wrong answer, a missing document, a misunderstanding, a bad decision. One small thing can put you in a situation where you have almost no control. That is what real fear feels like. Not always blood, not always violence, not always someone chasing you. Sometimes fear is a uniformed officer looking at you and asking where you are going when you know your answer has to be perfect and your mind is not working. Sometimes fear is being told to pull over when you know there is no safe way to explain yourself. Sometimes fear is realizing the airport name you just said does not exist. Sometimes fear is sitting in detention on a Friday morning, wondering if the weekend will trap you there. When I think back on those nights, the scariest part was not only the police. It was the feeling of being completely vulnerable, knowing the outcome depended on someone else's decision, knowing one mistake could create consequences I might not be able to escape, knowing that I had put myself in danger and then had to hope other people would not notice exactly how much danger I was in. I was lucky, I know that. Both times, things could have gone very differently. At the airport checkpoint, one sharper officer could have asked more questions. One deeper search could have changed everything. One bad reaction to my strange answer could have taken the night in a completely different direction. I had said I was going to a place that did not exist. I was not in a clear state of mind. I was driving late at night in an empty area. Any of those things could have been enough to make them dig harder. In the earlier situation, one different officer could have kept me in detention longer. One missed connection could have left me there through the weekend. One piece of paperwork could have turned my life upside down. I was released because someone knew someone. That is luck, not control. And that is what haunts me. Not ghosts, not demons, not something hiding in the dark. The haunted part is knowing how close I came to losing my own future because of a few careless decisions and a system much bigger than me. The haunted part is remembering the checkpoint lights ahead of me at 2 a.m. and feeling my whole body go cold. The haunted part is hearing the officer repeat that fake airport name back to me like a question and knowing in that second that I had made myself look suspicious. The haunted part is remembering that I drove away because I could have easily not. I think people sometimes believe fear has to be dramatic to be real, but some of the worst fear is quiet and official. It comes with paperwork, uniforms, bright lights, hard questions, and people who do not know you deciding what happens next. It comes with the feeling that your life has narrowed down to a few seconds, a few words, a few documents, and the mood of a stranger. Those nights taught me that a normal road can become a trap without warning. An empty airport area can become a checkpoint. A casual drive can become an interrogation. A missing card can become either a problem or a strange blessing. A young face can make an officer hesitate, but not enough. And a life can change before your mind has time to understand what is happening. That is why I still remember both incidents so clearly. The first one taught me how quickly a person can be taken into a system. The second taught me how fast stupidity can put you face to face with serious consequences. Both left the same feeling behind. I had been close to something I could not easily escape. Sometimes the most frightening moments are not the ones where something happens immediately. Sometimes the scariest moment is the realization that something almost happened, that you were one sentence away, one document away, one search away, one officer's decision away, and that if luck had shifted even slightly, your life could have taken a much darker turn. I was lucky both times. I know that. And because I know it, I do not remember those nights as exciting stories or funny mistakes. I remember them as warnings. I remember the cold feeling in my body when I saw the checkpoint. I remember the officer's confusion when I named an airport that did not exist. I remember the helplessness of being taken away years earlier. I remember the longest 2 hours of my life. I remember the strange relief afterward, the kind that does not make you happy, only shaken. Because relief after real fear does not feel clean. It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you almost stepped off. Those nights could have ended very differently, and that is something I will never forget. Nothing was stolen that night. Nobody was hurt. There was no broken window, no forced door, no muddy footprints across the floor, and no obvious sign that anyone had ever been inside the house. And somehow, that made it worse. Because if something had been missing, at least we would have had an answer. If a window had been smashed, if a lock had been damaged, if a stranger had been found hiding in a closet, the fear would have had a shape. It would have been terrifying, but it would have made sense. We could have said, someone broke in. We could have called it a burglary, a home invasion attempt, or a security failure. It would have been something real enough to point at. But that night gave us nothing clear. Only sounds, only timing, only the feeling that something happened inside our house while we were there, and yet we could not prove what it was. To this day, I still feel anxious about home security because of that night. It changed the way I think about being inside my own house. Before this happened, home was the one place where I could completely relax. A place where the outside world stopped at the door. A place where every sound had a normal meaning. The pipes, the walls, the floor settling, the refrigerator clicking on, the wind against the side of the house, the small noises you learn to ignore because they belong to your home. After that night, I stopped ignoring sounds so easily. Every unfamiliar noise became a question. Every small creak made me pause. Every door sound made my body react before my mind could explain it. Because once your house feels wrong one time, it is hard to make it feel completely right again. It happened late at night, when my wife and I were coming home. Nothing about the evening seemed strange. We were not scared before we arrived. We were not expecting trouble. We were simply returning to our house like normal, probably tired, probably thinking about getting inside, locking up, and ending the day. That is what makes moments like this so unsettling. They do not always start with warning. They begin in the middle of ordinary life. You park, you walk to the door, you unlock it, you step inside. You expect the house to feel the same way it always does. We opened the front door and walked in. Then I heard something. A door closing, somewhere inside the house. I stopped immediately. The sound was not loud enough to be dramatic, but it was clear enough to make my whole body freeze. It was that specific sound a door makes when it shuts from inside a home. Not a random crack, not the house settling, not the pop of wood changing temperature. A door closing. My brain started fighting it right away. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it came from outside. Maybe something shifted. Maybe air pressure moved something when we opened the front door. Maybe the sound was not what I thought it was. People do that when they hear something frightening inside their own house. They start negotiating with reality. They try to make the sound smaller, harmless, explainable, because the alternative is too big to accept in the first few seconds. Then I looked at my wife, and I knew she had heard it too. We did not need to say anything at first. The look on her face told me everything. She had heard the same thing I had heard. That meant it was not just my imagination. It was not a half-heard sound my tired brain had turned into something else. Two people had walked into a house that should have been empty, and both of us had heard a door close somewhere inside. For a few seconds, we just stood there. The whole house felt different immediately. A moment earlier, it had been our home. Familiar, safe, normal. Now it felt like a place we had interrupted. Like something had been happening inside before we opened the door, and whoever or whatever made that sound had just reacted to our arrival. The first thought that came to my mind was the alarm. Did I forget to set it? Had the system failed? Had someone somehow disabled it? Had someone been inside before the alarm was armed? The questions started piling up fast, and none of them felt good. My wife and I had always talked about what we would do if we ever came home and thought someone was inside. We had a plan. Most people talk about plans like that casually, never really expecting to use them. It is one thing to say what you would do. It is another thing to stand in your entryway late at night after hearing a door close inside your supposedly empty home. But we followed the plan. We quietly backed out of the house. We did not turn our backs completely. We kept watching the doorway and the dark spaces beyond it. We were waiting for movement, a shadow crossing a hallway, a face appearing from a room, a person trying to run out past us. Anything. Nothing moved. That almost made it worse. Fear changes your body quickly. 1 second you are tired and ready to go inside. The next, every nerve is awake. Your hearing sharpens. Your breathing feels too loud. The space around you seems to slow down. Every shadow becomes important. Every second stretches. The house is no longer a house. It becomes a series of possible hiding places. I went to my truck and grabbed my handgun. My wife took out her phone and started recording. The recording mattered to us because we wanted proof. We wanted to be able to look back and know exactly what had happened. If someone was inside, if anything moved, if we heard another sound, we wanted evidence. Fear can distort memory, but video is harder to argue with. Standing outside our own house, we shouted a warning into the darkness. We told whoever was inside that they had 15 seconds to show themselves. Otherwise, we were coming in. Those seconds felt incredibly long. We waited. Nothing happened. No voice, no footsteps, no sudden movement, no door opening, no person stepping out with hands raised. Only silence. That silence had weight. It felt like the house was holding its breath. We waited longer than 15 seconds because neither of us wanted to rush into a dangerous situation. But after a while, with nothing happening, we decided to go inside. I entered first. My wife stayed behind me. We had already decided how to move through the house. She stayed in the areas we had cleared while I searched ahead. I checked every room, every corner, every possible hiding place. I opened doors. I checked closets. I checked cabinets. I looked behind furniture. I looked under things. I looked in places where I knew a person probably could not fit, but I checked anyway, because fear does not care about probability. I am already a paranoid person when it comes to security, so I did not do a quick walkthrough and convince myself everything was fine. I searched carefully. Then I checked again. The house was not large. We did not have a massive amount of stuff. There were not many places where someone could truly disappear. That should have made me feel better, but it did not. In a smaller house, the fear becomes more concentrated. If someone is there, they are close. If a door closed inside, the source of that sound is not far away. The footage from my wife's phone showed us going through every room. It showed us checking everything. Nothing was missed. Nobody was there. There was no sign of anyone breaking in. No damaged lock. No open window. No stolen items. No explanation for the sound we both heard. After searching the entire house more than once, we finally started trying to accept that maybe there had been some other explanation. Maybe we had misunderstood the sound. Maybe opening the front door changed the air pressure and caused another door to move. Maybe something inside had shifted at exactly the wrong moment. Maybe it was one of those strange house noises that only sounded like a door closing. But the feeling never fully went away. We were tired. It was late. Nothing had been found. At some point, exhaustion starts to argue with fear. You cannot stand guard forever. You cannot search the same empty house all night. Eventually, you have to decide whether you can live with the uncertainty long enough to sleep. So we set the alarm again. We locked everything. Then we went to bed. Our front door setup is important because it makes the next part even stranger. The entrance has two doors. There is an outside metal security door, and then there is an inside wooden door. They do not sound alike at all. The metal security door has its own heavy sound. The wooden door has a completely different sound. If you live in a house long enough, you know these things without thinking. You know the difference between one door and another the way you know the voices of people you live with. There is no confusing them. That night, both doors were locked. The alarm was set. The house had been searched. Eventually, I managed to relax enough to fall asleep for a while. Then, about 2 hours later, I woke up, and I heard it. The sound of the inner door opening. The wooden door. The one inside the house. I woke up completely in an instant. There was no slow confusion, no half-dream state where I wondered if I had imagined it. I knew that sound. I knew exactly what door it was. My body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. Then came the alarm. It started going off. That meant something had triggered it. And then I heard the outer door open, the metal security door, the one that was supposed to be locked. My heart dropped because I understood the order of events. The inner wooden door opened. The alarm activated. Then the outer metal door opened. Something had happened at the front entrance while we were asleep. I lay there trying to make sense of it, but every possible answer felt wrong. Was someone inside the house after all? Had someone been hiding in a place we somehow missed? Had someone come in after we went to bed? Was there a malfunction? Did the alarm system glitch? Did one door somehow move on its own? Then the other? How could that happen when everything had been locked? The problem was, that I had already checked everything. I had walked through that house. I had opened every door. I had checked every room. I had looked in every place someone could hide. My wife had recorded it. We had proof of the search. We had done everything we were supposed to do. And yet, 2 hours later, the doors made sounds again. The alarm went off. The entrance behaved like someone was using it. That night completely changed the way I viewed my home. Because the scariest part was not finding someone inside. The scariest part was never knowing what actually happened. If we had found an intruder, at least the story would have had a clear center. A person, a motive, a way in, a reason to call police and say, "This is what happened." But there was nothing. No stolen items, no damage, no clear evidence, just a door closing when the house should have been empty. A full search that found no one. Then, hours later, doors opening and the alarm going off. That kind of uncertainty gets into your head. It makes your own home feel like it has a secret. You start thinking about every possibility, and none of them satisfy you. Maybe the first sound was mechanical. Maybe the second event was a malfunction. Maybe both things were unrelated. Maybe a draft moved the doors somehow. Maybe the alarm system glitched. Maybe a lock did not catch properly. But then you remember that both of you heard the first sound. You remember the difference between the inner and outer doors. You remember the order of sounds. You remember standing outside with a gun and a phone, shouting into your own house. You remember checking every room and finding nothing. You remember trying to sleep afterward, and then waking to the alarm. Even now, I think about that night whenever I hear something unusual in my house. A small noise in another room, a door shifting, a sound I cannot immediately identify. It does not matter how many times I tell myself there is probably a normal explanation. My body still remembers that night. It remembers the moment when the safe place suddenly did not feel safe. That is what people who have not experienced it may not understand. A house is not only walls and a roof, it is your sense of control. Your safe place. The place where you can be tired, distracted, vulnerable, asleep. When something unexplained happens there, it does more than scare you for a night. It changes the relationship you have with the space. The hallway becomes something to listen to. The front door becomes something to check twice. The alarm becomes something you trust, but also something you fear hearing. Every normal sound has to prove itself normal again. I still do not know what happened that night. Maybe there is a logical answer. Maybe something mechanical failed. Maybe a lock was not fully engaged. Maybe the alarm system had an issue. Maybe the air pressure explanation somehow covers part of it. Maybe there was something we missed, even though I do not know how. But I know what I heard. My wife heard it too. That is the part I cannot ignore. Two people heard the same door close sound inside an empty house. Two people searched that house and found nobody. Then, 2 hours later, the alarm went off after the unmistakable sounds of the inner and outer front doors. Whatever the explanation is, it was enough to make me look at home security differently forever. Because sometimes fear is not about seeing a face in the dark. Sometimes it is about hearing a door move when no one should be there. Sometimes it is about searching every room, finding nothing, and still feeling like your house is not finished with you yet. And sometimes the worst ending is not discovering who was inside. It is never knowing whether anyone was there at all. This happened in 2010, on a Wednesday evening around 6 p.m., and even now, after all these years, I still remember the exact feeling I had when I saw that face in the window. It was not one of those moments that started with fear. That is what makes it so unsettling to me. Nothing about the evening felt strange at first. There was no storm, no power outage, no creepy silence in the neighborhood, no strange dream the night before. It was just a normal school day, a normal Wednesday, and I was just a high school student coming home later than usual. Every Wednesday we had something at school called CAT, or Citizenship Advancement Training. Because of that, I usually arrived home later on Wednesdays than I did on other days. My family knew that. I knew my routine. There was nothing unusual about coming home when the evening was already starting to settle in. That day, after CAT ended, I decided to stop by Dunkin' Donuts before going home. I wanted to buy some treats for my nieces and nephews. It was a simple thought, nothing important, nothing dramatic. I just wanted to bring them something nice. I could already imagine their reactions. I pictured them running around, asking what I brought, smiling, fighting over who would get which treat, and getting excited the way kids do over small things. That was the mood I was in. Light, normal, a little tired from school, but happy because I was bringing something home for the children. I had no idea that a few minutes later, that simple walk to our gate would become something I would never fully understand. When I finally arrived home, everything seemed normal. The neighborhood was quiet, but not in a frightening way. It was just that calm, early evening quiet, when the day is almost finished, but the night has not fully taken over yet. The air felt ordinary. The street looked ordinary. Our house looked exactly the way it always looked. Nothing warned me. I walked toward the gate of our house, holding the treats in my hands. I was thinking more about my nieces and nephews than anything else. I expected to hear noise inside once I got closer. Maybe the kids talking. Maybe someone watching television. Maybe the normal sounds of family life behind the walls. I was about to open the gate when I noticed someone at the window. At first, I did not think much of it. It was just a child looking out. That was not strange in our house. Kids love windows. They look outside when they hear someone arrive. They press their faces near the glass. They peek through curtains. They want to know who is coming, especially if they think that person might have brought something for them. Then I realized who the child looked like. It looked like my young nephew. He was peeking through the window from inside the house, watching me as I stood outside by the gate. For a second, the sight made me smile. I thought he had probably seen me coming and was excited. Maybe he noticed the bag in my hands. Maybe he knew I had brought food. Maybe he was trying to see what I had before I even got inside. It felt cute, completely innocent. The kind of small family moment you do not think twice about while it is happening. But then, something strange happened. The moment I noticed him, he suddenly ducked down. Not slowly, not casually. He dropped out of sight like someone trying to hide, like he did not want me to see him. At first, I almost laughed. I thought maybe he was playing a game. Kids do that too. They peek, then hide. They pretend they were never there. They try to surprise you even though you already saw them. I thought maybe he was excited and being playful, pretending he had not been caught watching me from the window. But something about the way he moved stayed in my mind. It was too quick, too deliberate. It did not feel like a child happily hiding as part of a game. It felt like someone who had been caught doing something they were not supposed to be doing. Still, I did not feel real fear yet, because in my mind I knew who it was. It was my nephew, or at least it looked exactly like him. I had seen his face clearly enough, not a shadow, not a vague shape, not just a small figure that reminded me of him. It was him. Same face, same size, same presence at the window. I had no reason to doubt it. So I reached for the gate. That was when my phone vibrated. I looked down. It was a message from my mother. The message said, "Anak, we're all here at the park. Come straight here. We'll have dinner here." I stopped. For a second, I just stared at the screen. I read the message once. Then I read it again. Then again. The words were simple, but they made everything around me feel wrong. "We're all here at the park." All that one word started pressing into my mind. My family was not at home. They were at the park. Everyone was at the park. But if everyone was at the park, then who had I just seen inside the house? I looked up toward the window again, but I did not want to really look. The place where the child had been was empty now. No face, no movement, no curtain shifting. Just the same familiar window that had been part of our house for years. But now it did not feel familiar. The treats in my hands suddenly felt heavy and pointless. A few seconds earlier, I had been excited to bring them inside and give them to my nieces and nephews. Now I was standing outside my own house, staring at a window where I had just seen a child who should not have been there. My first reaction was confusion. Maybe my mother's message was wrong. Maybe not everyone was at the park. Maybe my nephew had stayed home. Maybe someone had come back early. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. But the message was clear. My mother had told me to come straight to the park because they were all there and would have dinner there. And if she was telling me that, then she believed nobody needed me to go inside the house. Nobody was supposed to be home. Then I remembered the way the child ducked down. That was the detail that made my stomach tighten. If it had really been my nephew, why did he hide like that? Why did he disappear the moment I noticed him? Why did he not smile, wave, or call out? Why did he not come to the door excited about the treats? He was a child. If he had seen me arrive with food, he should have been happy. But the face at the window had not looked happy. It had looked like it was watching. And when it realized I had seen it, it hid. That thought changed everything. Suddenly, the house was no longer just our house. It looked the same, but it felt different. The window looked darker. The front door looked farther away. The gate in front of me felt like the last line between me and something I did not understand. I did not call out. I did not open the gate and step inside. I did not knock. I did not try to prove myself wrong. I did not even keep staring at the window. Fear took over before curiosity could. That is something I still think about. A lot of people say that if something strange happened to them, they would investigate. They would open the door. They would search the house. They would call the person's name. They would get answers. But when you are actually standing there, and your own home suddenly feels like it might not be empty, answers stop feeling important. Distance becomes important. Safety becomes important. Leaving becomes important. So I locked the gate, and I walked away. I did not turn around. That part still feels strange when I remember it. Walking away from your own house should not feel like escaping. But that evening, it did. Every step away from the gate felt like I was creating space between myself and whatever had been looking at me through that window. I went straight to the park where my family was. The whole way there, my mind kept trying to explain what had happened. I kept thinking maybe I had misunderstood the message. Maybe my nephew had gone home and my mother did not know. Maybe someone else was at the house. Maybe my eyes had played a trick on me because the evening light was changing. Maybe I saw a reflection or a curtain or some object inside the room that looked like a child's face. But none of those explanations felt right. I knew what I saw. When I arrived at the park, everything looked normal. Too normal. My family was there, just like my mother had said. People were gathered, talking, eating, relaxing. There was no fear on anyone's face. No one was acting like anything strange had happened. Nobody seemed worried. It was just a regular family evening at the park. And then I saw him. My nephew, The same young nephew I thought I had just seen looking through the window at home. He was there with everyone else. Not at the house, not hiding inside, not peeking through a window. Standing right there at the park. Seeing him there made the situation worse, not better. If he had not been there, maybe I could have convinced myself that he had stayed home somehow. Maybe I could have asked why he was inside and gotten some simple answer. But he was there. My family was there. Everyone was there. That meant the child inside the house could not have been him, and yet it looked exactly like him. Not similar. Not just a little boy with the same size or haircut. Exactly like him. That is the part I still cannot explain. I did not tell everyone right away in some dramatic way. I was trying to understand it myself. I was trying to act normal, but my mind was still at the house, still standing outside that gate, still looking at that window. The treats I had bought were no longer the center of anything. The joy I had felt on the way home had been replaced by a cold, strange feeling I could not shake. Because there are only a few possibilities in a moment like that, and none of them feel comforting. Either someone was inside our house, or something that looked like my nephew was inside our house, or my mind somehow created an image so clear that I still remember it years later. If it was a person, then who was it? Why were they in our home? Why were they looking out the window? Why did they hide when they realized I saw them? And how could they look exactly like my nephew? If it was not a person, then what was it? That is the question that still bothers me. The way it reacted is what makes the memory feel so wrong. It was not just standing there. It was watching me. And when I noticed it, it ducked. That reaction felt aware. It felt intentional. It felt like whatever was at that window knew it had been seen. That is not how a reflection behaves. That is not how a shadow behaves. That is not how imagination feels when you are wide awake, holding a bag of food at your own gate. Years have passed since that Wednesday evening, but the memory has never faded the way normal memories do. I still remember walking up to the gate. I still remember the calm of the neighborhood. I still remember seeing that small face in the window. I still remember the tiny moment when I smiled because I thought it was my nephew. I still remember the sudden way the face disappeared, and I still remember the exact shift in my body when my mother's message arrived. Before that message, the scene had been ordinary. After that message, it became impossible. That is what fear does sometimes. It changes a memory in 1 second. A child at a window is normal. A child at a window in an empty house is not. A nephew peeking out to see what food you brought is cute. Something wearing your nephew's face, hiding when it knows you saw it, is something else entirely. I have tried to think of every explanation. Maybe someone else had entered the house. But again, who? And why would they look like a child from my family? Why would they be standing at the window instead of stealing something or hiding completely? Why would they duck down the moment I looked? Maybe it was a neighbor's child somehow inside. But I knew my nephew's face. I was not seeing a random child. I was not guessing from far away. I knew who I thought I saw. Maybe it was a trick of the light. But tricks of light do not usually look directly at you and then duck out of sight. Maybe I was tired from school and cat. Maybe my mind expected to see the kids because I was carrying treats for them, so it created what I expected to see. But I was awake. I was standing outside. I was not half asleep. I was not dreaming. I had no reason to hallucinate a child in the window, and even if my mind made a mistake, why did it feel so real? Why do I still remember it so clearly? There is something especially frightening about seeing something familiar where it should not be. A stranger at the window would have been terrifying, but at least the fear would make sense. I would have known immediately that something was wrong. I would have run, called someone, or shouted for help. But seeing my nephew delayed the fear. For a few seconds, I trusted what I saw. I thought it was family. I thought it was safe. I thought it was a child excited to see me. That is what makes the memory so disturbing. Whatever I saw, whether it was a person, a mistake, or something I cannot explain, it looked like someone I loved. It used a familiar face to make the moment feel harmless. Only later, when the message came, did the truth hit me. He could not have been there. The house was supposed to be empty. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if my phone had not vibrated at that exact moment. What if I had not received my mother's message until after I went inside? What if I had opened the gate, walked to the door, unlocked it, and stepped into the house holding those treats? What if I had called my nephew's name? What if I had gone toward the room where I saw him duck? Would I have found someone? Would I have found nothing? Would I have heard movement deeper inside the house? Would I have seen that face again? Those questions are worse than the memory itself. Because the truth is, I do not know what was waiting inside. I only know that something stopped me before I went in. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was my mother's message arriving at exactly the right second. But I am grateful I did not open that gate and go inside. I am grateful I walked away, because curiosity feels brave when you are telling the story later. In the moment, curiosity can get you hurt. It can lead you toward a window, a room, a hallway, or a door that you should have left alone. That evening taught me that not every strange thing needs to be investigated. Sometimes your body understands danger before your mind has enough proof. Sometimes the safest choice is not to answer the question. Sometimes the right thing to do is leave. I never got a clear explanation for what happened. No one told me someone had been inside. No one admitted to playing a prank. There was no obvious break-in, no simple answer, no final piece that made everything normal again. The story stayed unfinished, and maybe that is why it still bothers me. A child at the window, a child who looked exactly like my nephew, a message saying everyone was at the park, a house that should have been empty, and the feeling of standing outside my own gate, suddenly unsure whether the place in front of me was really safe. That is the part people do not always understand about experiences like this. The fear is not only in the moment. It stays in the questions afterward. It stays in the way you remember the window. It stays in the way you think about empty houses. It stays in the idea that something familiar can appear where it should not be. And for a few seconds, you might believe it. Even now, when I think of that evening, I do not picture the park first. I do not picture the treats. I do not picture school or cat or the walk home. I picture the window. I picture the small face looking out. I picture it dropping out of sight the moment it knew I had seen it. And I picture myself standing there with my phone in my hand, reading my mother's message, realizing that the child I had just seen was already somewhere else. I still do not know who or what was really watching me from inside that house. But I know one thing. It was not my nephew. When I was around 11 or 12 years old, something happened in my childhood home that I still cannot fully explain. Even now, years later, I can remember the details more clearly than I remember many normal days from that time. That is how fear works sometimes. It takes one moment from your life and burns it into your memory so deeply that even decades later, you can still feel the room, the darkness, the silence, and the exact second when everything stopped feeling normal. The strange thing about nights like that is that they usually do not begin in a dramatic way. There is no warning, no cold breeze moving through the house, No strange dream before it happens. No feeling that the night is going to become something you will carry forever. It starts like any other night. You are in your own home. You are sleeping in your own bed. Your family is nearby. The walls around you are familiar. The sounds of the house belong to you because you have heard them all your life. You do not think about danger because home is the one place where danger is not supposed to be waiting. And then something happens that changes the way you look at that house forever. At the time, my bedroom was upstairs, connected to my brother's rooms by a small hallway. The staircase leading to the second floor was right near that hallway, so anyone coming upstairs would naturally pass that area before reaching our bedrooms. It was not a complicated layout, but it mattered because I knew the sounds of that staircase. I knew what it sounded like when someone came up at night. I knew the difference between one step and another, between the quiet weight of someone trying not to wake anyone and the louder steps of someone moving normally. That night, I was asleep in my room. Everything was quiet. The kind of quiet a house has in the middle of the night, when the whole family is asleep and the world outside feels far away. No TV, no voices, no movement, just the stillness of an old house at night. Then, sometime during the night, I woke up. The first thing I noticed was a sound. Someone was walking up the stairs. Slow footsteps, coming closer. At first, I did not feel scared. That is important. I did not wake up terrified, and I did not immediately think something was wrong. My first thought was simple and normal. I assumed it was my mom. Parents sometimes check on their kids in the middle of the night. Maybe she had heard something. Maybe she thought one of us was awake. Maybe she was just walking upstairs for some ordinary reason. So I lay there, half awake, listening. The footsteps continued. Then I noticed the hallway light. As the person reached the top of the stairs, the light suddenly went out. The hallway became dark. That was the first detail that felt strange, though not strange enough to scare me yet. I was still sleepy, still trying to wake up fully, and my mind was moving slowly. Maybe she turned it off because she did not want to wake us. Maybe the light had already been on for some reason. Maybe I had only imagined it switching off. When you are a child in bed at night, your brain tries very hard to keep things normal. Then I heard movement in the hallway. And then I saw her. My mom walked into my room. At least, that is what I thought at first. She looked exactly like my mother. Same shape, same presence, same way of taking up space in the doorway. In that first moment, I had no reason to think it was anyone else. She was familiar to me in the way only a parent can be familiar. I knew her outline even in the dark. I knew the way she looked when she came into a room, but something was already wrong. She did not turn on the light. Most people walking into a dark bedroom would either switch on the light, whisper your name, or move carefully so they would not bump into anything. But she did none of that. She just walked inside quietly, slowly, without saying a single word. The room stayed dark. The hallway behind her stayed dark, and she kept walking toward my bed. At first, I waited for her to speak. I expected her to ask if I was awake, or if I was okay, or if I needed something. But she said nothing. She did not call my name. She did not explain why she was there. She did not even move like someone checking on a child. She moved like she already knew exactly where she was going, directly toward me. The closer she got, the more uncomfortable I felt. It is hard to explain because she still looked like my mother. That was the worst part. If it had been a stranger, I think my mind would have reacted faster. If it had been a dark shape with no familiar features, I would have screamed immediately. But because it looked like her, my fear was delayed. My mind kept trying to force the scene to make sense. That is Mom. Mom is in my room. Mom would not scare me. Mom would say something, but she did not. She kept coming closer in the dark. Finally, I sat up and said, "Mom?" The moment I spoke, she stopped. She did not answer. She did not say my name. She did not ask what was wrong. She just stopped. That silence was the moment the fear truly began. It was not a normal silence. It was not the silence of someone tired or confused. It felt like the room itself had stopped breathing with her. She stood there facing me, and for a few seconds, nothing moved. Then she started moving backward. And that is the detail I will never forget. When I say she moved backward, I do not mean she turned around and left the room. I mean she stayed facing me. She kept her body turned toward me, looking in my direction, and slowly moved backward toward the doorway. She never turned her back. She never looked behind her. She just backed away, slowly, carefully, in a way that did not feel natural. At first, I was confused more than anything. I remember thinking, why is my mom acting like that? Why is she not talking? Why is she walking backward? Why did she stop the second I said her name? The whole thing felt wrong, but my brain was still trying to protect me by keeping the explanation simple. Maybe she was sleepwalking. Maybe she was trying not to wake my brothers. Maybe she was upset. Maybe I was not fully awake. But the way she moved did not look right. It was too controlled, too quiet, too focused on me. She moved backward out of my room and into the hallway, still facing me, still not saying anything. Then she reached the stairs and disappeared toward them. I waited for the sound of her going down. Nothing, no footsteps, no creaking stairs, no soft movement below, nothing at all. The hallway light never came back on either. That was when confusion turned into something colder. Because if my mom had walked backward out of my room and gone downstairs, I should have heard the stairs. That old house made noise. You could not move through it completely silently, especially not at night when every sound carried. The stairs creaked, the floorboards creaked, doors shifted. The house always announced movement in some way. But after she disappeared near the stairs, there was only silence. I stayed in bed, staring into the dark. A few minutes passed, though it felt much longer. I tried to convince myself there was a normal explanation. Maybe I had been half asleep. Maybe I had dreamed part of it and woken up in the middle. Maybe I had imagined the footsteps, the light, the figure, all of it. The human brain can do strange things between sleep and waking. I know that now, and maybe some part of me knew it then too. But the feeling would not go away. Something about what I had seen felt too clear, too deliberate, too real. Eventually, I could not stay in bed anymore. The room no longer felt safe. The dark corners felt deeper. The doorway felt like it was still holding the shape of whoever had stood there. I got up, got dressed, and walked downstairs. The entire house was dark. Every light was off. That detail bothered me immediately. If my mom had been up and walking around, there should have been some sign of it. A light in the kitchen, a bathroom light, a lamp. Something, but the house was completely dark, and the silence felt heavy in a way I had never noticed before. I looked at the time. It was almost 3 a.m. There is something about 3 a.m. that makes a house feel less like a home and more like a place holding its breath. During the day, rooms are just rooms. At that hour, every room feels like it has another version of itself. The living room looks unfamiliar. The kitchen looks too still. Hallways look longer. Shadows seem to sit in corners with more weight. I went to my parents' room and woke my mom up. She looked confused, sleepy, and completely unaware of what I was about to say. I told her what had happened. I told her I thought she had come upstairs. I told her I heard footsteps. I told her the hallway light went out. I told her she walked into my room and came toward my bed. I told her she stopped when I said "Mom," then walked backward out of the room without answering. Then I told her what she had been wearing: a red shirt with an American flag on it, blue pajama bottoms with teddy bears. I remember those details clearly because they made the whole thing feel more real to me. It was not just a vague shape. I had seen clothing. I had seen enough to describe her. But when I looked at my actual mother, I knew something was wrong. She was not wearing those clothes. She was wearing a nightgown. She looked confused, not guilty, not like someone caught pretending, not like someone who had sleepwalked and forgotten. She looked genuinely confused, as if she had no idea why I was standing there telling her she had just been upstairs. She told me she had been asleep the entire time. She had never come upstairs. She had never walked into my room. She had no memory of doing anything like that. That was when the fear really started, because suddenly I was no longer trying to understand why my mom had acted strangely. I was trying to understand who I had actually seen. The person looked like my mother. I recognized her. I had no reason to think it was anyone else, but my real mother had been asleep downstairs, wearing different clothes, the entire time. That is a very different kind of fear. It is not the fear of seeing a monster. It is worse in a way, because what I saw was familiar. It wore the shape of someone I trusted completely, someone who should have meant safety, someone I would never run from. And yet, when I spoke to it, it did not answer. It backed away in silence. The house itself made the experience even more unsettling. It was over 100 years old. Old houses have a different feeling, especially at night. They settle loudly. The floors creak. The walls seem to shift. The air feels older somehow, like the house has absorbed too many years of people living, sleeping, arguing, crying, and dying inside it. Even before that night, there had been stories and strange feelings connected to the house. Nothing I could point to as proof of anything, but enough to make the place feel different from a normal home. Old houses hold history whether you want them to or not. Every room has belonged to someone else before you. Every hallway has been walked by people whose names you may never know. Every stair has carried steps from years you were not alive to see. After that night, I started thinking about that history more. Who had lived there before us? What had happened inside those walls? Had someone died there? Had someone used that upstairs hallway the same way my family did? Was it possible that something from the house's past was still moving through it? Or was it something else entirely? I know there are normal explanations people might suggest. Maybe I was still partly asleep. Maybe I experienced some kind of waking dream. Maybe my mind created something that felt completely real. The brain can produce incredibly vivid images during that strange space between sleep and waking, and those images can seem as real as anything else. I understand that. I really do. But there are details that still bother me. The footsteps on the stairs before I saw her, the hallway light going out, the way she entered without turning on the light, the way she walked directly toward my bed, the way she stopped only when I spoke, the way she moved backward without turning around, the silence after she reached the stairs, the fact that I never heard her walk down, the clothing I described, and most importantly, the fact that my mother was asleep downstairs wearing something completely different. Those details make it hard for me to dismiss the whole thing as a dream. If it was a dream, why did it begin with a sound that woke me up? If it was only imagination, why did it feel so physically real? Why do I remember the clothes so clearly? Why did the silence after she disappeared feel so wrong? I have asked myself these questions many times. I have never found an answer that fully satisfies me. The part that stays with me most is not just that I saw something strange. It is that I saw something familiar acting wrong. There is something deeply disturbing about seeing the face or shape of someone you love behaving in a way that person never would. It creates a kind of split in your mind. One part says, "That is my mother." The other part says, "No, something is wrong." And when the real person later tells you they were never there, the memory becomes even darker. Because then, the familiar shape becomes a disguise. I do not know what I saw walking into my room that night. I do not know if it was connected to the old house. I do not know if it was something my mind created while I was half awake. I do not know if the house had some kind of memory inside it, replaying something in a form I could understand. I do not know if something chose to look like my mother because that was the only way it could get close to me without making me scream immediately. That last thought is the one I hate the most. Because if it had appeared as a stranger, I would have reacted differently. I would have cried out. I would have run. I would have known instantly that something was wrong. But because it looked like my mom, I waited. I gave it time to come closer. I let it walk into my room because I trusted the shape it was wearing. That is what still scares me. Not the dark room, not the old house, not even the footsteps on the stairs. The scariest part was trust being used against me, even if only for a few seconds. After that night, my childhood home never felt exactly the same. I still lived there. I still slept there. Life went on because life always does. But something had changed. The upstairs hallway felt different. The staircase felt different. My bedroom doorway felt different. If I woke up in the middle of the night, I listened harder than before. If I heard movement in the house, I waited to make sure it sounded normal. If a hallway light changed, my stomach tightened. I became aware of the house in a way I had not been before. Before that night, it was just home. After that night, it was a place where something had walked into my room wearing my mother's shape. I have thought about that night many times over the years. I have turned it over in my mind, searching for the missing piece that would make it make sense. Maybe one day I will convince myself it was sleep, imagination, or some strange trick of memory. Maybe that is the reasonable answer. But no matter how many times I try to explain it, I always return to the same question. If it was not my mother walking into my room at 3 a.m., then who was it? Or maybe the better question is, what was it? Because the thing I saw did not behave like my mother. It did not speak like her. It did not comfort me. It did not check on me. It did not act surprised when I called out. It simply stopped, as if being recognized had interrupted it, then backed away without turning around and vanished near the stairs without making a sound. That is not how my mother would have left my room. That is not how any person I know would have left my room. To this day, part of me believes it may have been connected to the history of that old house. Maybe it was some presence from before us. Maybe it was some old memory replaying itself in the wrong shape. Maybe it was nothing more than my own brain creating a vivid nightmare in the seconds between sleep and waking. I will never know for sure. But I do know this. After that night, I understood that sometimes the most frightening thing is not seeing something obviously strange. Sometimes the most frightening thing is seeing something you trust. Something familiar. Something safe. Something that looks exactly like your mother. And then learning, when the lights are on and the real person is standing in front of you, that whatever came into your room was not her at all. The stories may be over, but some nights do not end when the video does. The people you heard tonight were not looking for fear. They were living normal lives until one moment changed the way they saw the world around them. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to Nockmeyer Witness for more true accounts from people who saw something they wish they could forget. Good night, and if you wake up suddenly, do not assume it was just a dream.